Hi there everyone, my name's Helen and thank you very much for popping along to my channel today, The New Leaf. I'm here today to talk to you about one of my most favourite propagation activities. As many of you know by now, I am absolutely obsessed with propagating and making more baby plants. You can't have too many baby plants. I absolutely love begonia, and you can never have too many begonia or indeed babies because they are the cutest little babies ever. So I'm here today to show you one of the ways you can propagate begonias. So I'm sure a lot of you know that you can take a leaf cutting very simply by just cutting off a leaf with a nice long petiole or leaf stem and putting it in a bit of water. But something else you can do if you're feeling a little bit more adventurous. This is fun, it requires a bit more patience, but you do get a much higher yield. I'm going to show you today how to take leaf wedge cuttings from some of your favourite begonias. So today I'm using Rex begonias. I have tried this on cane begonias and it does work, but obviously I've only tried one or two varieties. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that as well. So today I'll be taking some leaf cuttings from a few different types of begonias and showing you how to cut them into wedges and how to propagate gorgeous little plants like these little babies. And I'll put some close-ups in as well. They are just absolutely gorgeous things, and these have all been grown from little wedge cuttings. It's a really simple process. There's a couple of things to keep in mind, but once you've tried it once and you have great success, I'm sure you'll be trying it over and over again. I grow loads and loads of wedge cuttings, so I can show you all the different stages. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's get on with things. I'm just going to start by showing you some of the different leaf shapes of begonias, and this process works with all of these. I really do recommend just diving in and just giving this a try. It's brilliant if you find that you have a bit of an aged or damaged leaf on your plant, if maybe it's torn or something like that, maybe an insect had a nibble out of it. All those sorts of damaged leaves, as long as they're essentially healthy, are totally fair game to try this process on. It's a really good way to use up some of those precious leaves that maybe you weren't really ready to say goodbye to yet. So I've got a couple of maple leaf type begonias here. So I'll just show you this green one. I don't know which one this is, but it's beautiful. It's got a lovely red tinge to the back of the leaf. But you can see very clearly there that it's got a really pointy leaf, very much like a maple or acer tree. So these are brilliant because I find that you can get loads and loads of cuttings out of just one leaf by sort of making the most of all these pointy sections here. So there's that one we're going to try. There's this one here, which I believe is called something like Bewitched Wintergreen, something along those lines. Again, you can see that one's not quite so pointy. There's still going to be a lot of material we can use there because the leaves are really quite a good size. This process also works very well on what I would call the sort of standard Begonia Rex leaf shape. So I've got this one here, which I believe is called Red Heart. This is one that actually went a bit melty and funny in the shop, so I've been rehabbing it under my grow lights out the back. But this might be a leaf shape that you're much more familiar with Begonia Rex. So we're going to do it with those ones as well. And then last but not least, some of you might have these Boweray types or Bowerai or eyelash begonias. So this is a Mazai type. So this has got really quite a small leaf. So we're going to cut some of these off and give it a try with that sort of very teardrop shaped leaf as well. So phase one is very much choose your leaf and snip it. So while we're doing this, just in case there's any of you who've never taken a standard leaf cutting with a petiole attached, I'm just going to really quickly show you how to do that. So I think we'll start with our green maple leaf. So I have here a jar with an inch or so of water in. So what we're going to do is look at the plant, and we're going to choose a really nice, healthy, mature leaf. As I said, if it has a split or a hole in it or anything like that, still use it. But you do want it to be a nice, mature one. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to use this one that's poking out here. So take your leaf, snip it, leaving yourself a nice long length of stem, and then put it in your water. It's that simple. So what will actually happen is you'll end up with a tiny little baby plant growing out of this end here. Even if it's fully submerged under the water, they really don't care. It will just keep growing away under there. So first you'll see a few roots appear, and then gradually you'll see tiny shoots which are actually tiny, tiny little leaves. It is a really lovely process to watch. I do recommend trying it in water if you've never tried it before. It's definitely the easy, lazy option. So that is how you do that, really very simple. Something important to mention before you cut your leaves to use for propagation, clean your scissors. So whether that's with something like a mild bleach solution or hydrogen peroxide or just hot soapy water, it is a really good idea to clean your scissors to make sure there's no yucky bacteria on there that can get into the cut ends of those stems and help them rot. So it's a really good idea to give them a clean. I'm a little bit slack about doing it sometimes. I have to be honest, I often don't bother at all. And probably as a result of that, I end up, I should think, losing a few more cuttings than perhaps I would do if I bothered to clean them. So it is a good idea to do that, especially if your mother plant is very, very precious, because you definitely wouldn't want to introduce any germs or bacteria to her. So one thing I should also mention when you take leaf cuttings to water propagate with the nice petiole attached, it's a little bit cheeky. It's something I tried because I propagate a lot of peperomia as well, and they work in a very similar way. So once your baby plant has appeared at the cut end, you wait for it to get a good size, good set of roots and some nice size leaves, pot it up in some soil, leave it to settle for a week or two, and then when you're happy that that little plant can sustain itself without this mother leaf, what you can actually do is snip it away from the baby plant, and guess what I'm going to say? You can do exactly the same thing again, pop it straight back in water and you can reuse it. I think I've got a maximum of 3 little plants out of 1 leaf before I sort of felt sorry for the thing and threw it in the bin. So we've snipped a green leaf, so I will just do the same with the other ones I've got to show you. So there's this rather wonderful chap here. Now this leaf's got a bit of a wobbly rip at the end, so I'm totally going to use that one. So snip. You can put them in your jar of water just in a sort of holding pattern if you're faffing around like me. You just want to keep them nice and fresh as a daisy until you're going to cut them up into your wedges. So do stick them in water if you want. There's no harm in doing that at all. So there's that one. So, oh, that's got a bit of a dry, crispy bit on there. So I think I'm going to use that one. So there we go. And I think just in case that does have a bit of a moment, we're going to just have a nice healthy one as well. So yeah, we'll have that one too. There we go. With this leaf, as you can see, it's got a dry, crispy mark on it. I think it's just where it's been knocked or banged. I can't see any pest damage there. So what I would recommend, so this doesn't get any worse, is actually trim that off and throw that bit away. And you should find actually that leaf just will stay like that and work perfectly well. So last but not least, we've got our Mazai here. So these leaves are quite small, so I'm going to try and find a nice big one, or 2 perhaps. So there's a nice one there. Try and find oh, that's quite a nice big one. There we go. So that is all of them done. So I've just popped those all in my jar of water to keep them nice and fresh, just while I get my other bits of equipment together. Just very quickly, a small amount of equipment here. I've got some trays to fill with soil. I've got scissors. I've got my awesome pokey stick. Obviously I have the leaf cuttings we've already taken. I've got here my potting compost mix. This is my peat-free mixture. So in here I've got coir compost, worm castings and a good amount of perlite and sand. which will hopefully go some way to prevent your precious begonia cuttings from rotting. They can be quite delicate and fragile things when you cut them up into their wedges, so I do try and provide a lot of drainage just to try and stop some of them rotting as much as I can. On with the fun part. I'm going to show you now how to cut up your lovely begonia leaves into wedges to then put them into soil later on and propagate, and hopefully ends up with just millions of tiny cute baby begonias. So we'll start with our, what I like to call, standard leaf shaped begonia. So what you want to do first is cut off your stem, so really close to the leaf. So we don't need that anymore, so that can go. So you've now got this lovely flat leaf. So if you look at the veins on the back, we are going to be cutting in wedges in between those veins. So what this means is, because you're slashing the veins, when you bury these in the soil, it actually means that where you've cut the vein, that is where the baby plants pop out from. It's absolutely fascinating. And even after having done this probably 15, 20 times, I still am amazed that this works every single time. So you can see those veins on the back there. So if I show you this one, I will do a close-up of this as well. So I am just going to cut, starting from where the petiole was, working my way out. So I'm just going to cut up in between that vein. So there's one, the little one's quite small. And then again, working from the center outwards. It doesn't have to be perfect. You might find you're going in between veins or across veins. It really doesn't matter. You don't have to be too precious. And then cutting in between those veins from the center outwards. So there's that one done. So we're going to use this nice silver, what was it called? Bewitched wintergreen again. So as I mentioned before, this is a bit of a ripped and manky leaf, which is totally fair game to use. You might not like having that rather scruffy thing on your plant, so I'm a real fan of taking them off and trying to get yourself something extra out of it. Why not? So again, we'll start by cutting off that petiole really close to the leaf like that. Again, you can see these quite prominent veins on the back, so we are going to be cutting in between those. So with some of the longer pointy leaves, I end up with really quite long wedges, so I do find you can take some extra pieces sometimes. So that bit I'm going to cut off, and because it's a bit scraggy, I'm just going to trim that up a little bit like that. And then that's my cutting there, and I will put that down in the soil that way. I know obviously it's not exactly a wedge, but I have been quite daring with some of these cuttings, and I do find that they will pretty much work whatever happens. So there's that one. So I'm going to start working my way out like that. So there's one. And then there, that is huge. We'll probably make that into two. And then again, in between the veins there, again, another big one. Probably leave that. I could cut that into two, but I think I'm going to leave that one. So the big ones, what I would do is just cut that in half. So we'll put that in, whoops. So we'll put that in that way down. And then this one, you've got the main vein, so you can just trim that up a little bit so that there's a bit less bulk. There we go. And then that one again was quite massive, so we're just going to trim that up a little bit. You could probably use that bit as well if you wanted to. Yeah, we'll shove that in as well. Just make sure you keep them the right way up, because that is important. I'm going to take the top off that because I think it will go a bit crispy. So it's quite good to have nice, neat cuttings, because sometimes little pointy ends and things can go a little bit crispy. So if you can trim off a bit of excess here and there, I do recommend doing that, such like. So there we go, that's our next leaf done. So the next one I'm going to chop up is our little maize eye leaf. So again, you know the score by now. Cut the petiole off because we don't need that. So obviously these are quite diddy small. Again, using the veins on the back as a guide. We're going to exactly the same process. Work our way out from the centre. Just creating little wedges. Working out from the petiole. So these are quite small, but there's no reason they shouldn't work. So there's that one. Now we've got our green maple. I do like doing these really pointy ones because I find that they just are such good value. You can get so many out of the one leaf. So petiole off. Now you can basically almost cut each point into a wedge, but fiddle about and see how you do, because these are brilliant. So there's one. Little one there. Ooh. And there we go, working all the way round. You can see how well that works. They come out so neatly. Ooh, that's almost tearing itself apart. Give it a little hand. So there we go. So that's huge. So often with these really pointy ones, I will use the point as an extra cutting and just cut it straight out like that. Again, just make sure you keep it the right way up. Now these bits we don't need, looks like Wolverine. So we're going to trim those off because they will almost certainly just go a bit dry and crispy. So we'll trim that up more neatly like that. So we're nearly there. Bit of excess off there. So yeah, if it's a small cutting, I tend to cut off these wibbly pointy bits because I do find as the cutting starts to dry out, they basically flop over, and you really want to prevent your cuttings touching each other because that can sort of promote a bit of rot and things going on. So we've trimmed that one up as well. Right, so that is all of those done. I'll do those extra ones off camera, and then I will be back to show you how to tuck them into your soil. We're very nearly on to the fun part. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that over the years I have found it very important to remember to give yourself the best chance of success. So the first thing is to make sure that you do not firm this soil down really very much at all, but you hardly want to firm it. So the reason is that if you imagine those tiny little sprouts coming out of those cut veins like we spoke about earlier, so they're pushing through the surface of the soil, trying to pop their little heads out. So if you've ever sown some tiny seeds before, it's exactly that sort of process. The seed germinates and tries to push its way up through the surface of the soil. So we really want to give them the best chance of doing that. I have forgotten in the past and wondered why my cuttings weren't doing anything, loosened up the soil a bit, and lo and behold, a week or two later, all these new little shoots started popping up. The other thing to remember, it sounds so obvious, but it's really important, is to make sure the soil stays damp. So especially if you have them in bright light or it is the summer, you really want to make sure that the soil is damp pretty much all the way through, because it really helps the success of the cuttings, and it also helps stop those little pieces of leaf drying out too much. Right, so we're going to start putting them into the soil now. So all you need to do, making sure that your cutting is the correct way up, is make a tiny little hole in the soil and then pop it in a little way, maybe 5 or 6 millimeters underneath, and give it the gentlest of firms in. So I've just done that one, so I'll pop this one in as well. Try and space them out a bit. You don't want these guys to be touching, because that does help prevent them going mouldy and rotty, so that is a good tip. So I'll just do a few more and then I will pop a close-up in for you so you can see better what I'm doing. But this really is a lovely simple process. See, I'm really hardly, so I'm always using my middle finger to do that. I've just realised that's so rude. So we'll keep popping them in. I'll do a few more before I speed things up a bit and do the close-up. So as you can see, so simple, just putting those cut ends into the soil a few millimeters and then just giving it a little push down. So I'll just finish this row. Really is so simple. So obviously where you have a pointy end, that's really easy to put in. Just make a little hole. Sometimes if you have one with a flat end, I can't find one now, I need one of course. Oh, there's one. So sometimes if you have one with a flat cut end, you might need to just make a little groove or a little trench to sit it in, but it's so easy. So right, you can see what I've done there. So they are all now sitting happily in the soil, nice and anchored in. So I'm going to carry on putting those in, and I'll also do a little close up and stick that in as well, and I'll see you back here in a minute. Right, they are all in. So there is the one tray. I have packed them in quite closely, but I have tried to make sure that they do not touch. As you may have got the impression from some of my other videos, I always tend to overfill, overstuff, overdo. I'm just greedy. I like to have lots, what can I say? So you may choose to be more cautious, or you may choose to go for it with great guns like I do. As I mentioned, you might lose a few cuttings. A few of them do tend to either go crispy and dry out, or go the other way and go a bit melty and floppy and mouldy. You can give them a spray with a weak hydrogen peroxide solution. I'll probably do that off camera because I have forgotten to make up a new bottle because I ran out. So that can help safeguard against mould. The other thing is to make sure that they always have lots and lots of good airflow around them. This is why, as I mentioned, I don't use a lid at this time of year, because I find that I tend to lose more to rotting that way. So as I mentioned, I do find that I lose a few to crisping while they're rooting, but then it seems that once they have rooted, they kind of stop doing that. So if you notice that your cuttings have stopped going crispy and falling over, then there is a fair chance they may have actually rooted. So it might be worth just giving them a little tug and seeing if you feel any resistance. So at this time of year in the summer, these usually I find root within a week or two, but it tends to be maybe 4 to 6 weeks before I actually see any growth coming to the surface of the soil. So it can take a bit longer than water propagation, but I find that I get such a good yield from this. And once they've started rooting, you can pretty much leave them alone to get on with it, apart from the odd spray. So I find it a really, really good method. I really do enjoy this process. I'll stick some shots in of the 4 trays I've currently got going at the moment. A couple of the trays I did 2 months ago, and the other 2 I did 1 month ago, but they're all popping all over the place. They've stopped crisping now, so I think I'm going to have a really good success rate with those, hopefully. One thing I did forget to do is give them a little spray, so I'm just going to do that now. This is also another reason that I don't keep a lid on, because I mean, I can only imagine what would happen at this time of year if I sprayed them like this and then put a lid on. I think we all know there would be flop, there would be mould, there would be melt, it would all be going on. So we're not going to do that. So as I mentioned briefly earlier on, it's a good idea to keep these in bright, indirect light. I find they can take a little bit of direct light, but you definitely wouldn't want them being blasted by it all day, because again, crisping. So again, try and keep an eye on the watering to make sure that soil stays damp. and also that they have good airflow around them, and hopefully, bar losing the odd few cuttings, you should hopefully not go wrong with this process. I thoroughly recommend it. It makes me feel like a proper mad scientist. As I say, I am still absolutely stunned that this even works. If you have a go at this process and enjoy it, then I definitely recommend doing a bit of research on peperomia leaf propagation, because there are quite a few similar methods producing similar results. I really do recommend it. It is a lot of fun, and you'll end up hopefully with so many baby begonias, and you can give them away to all your friends. I hope you found my video useful today. I really do enjoy the process. It's one of my most favourite things to do. I hope that really comes across. It really is very simple. It might be a bit fiddly, but I think the process itself is really easy to do. So thank you very much for watching today. Please do hit those like and subscribe buttons, and hopefully I'll see you back here soon. Thanks again. Bye.